Do wind farms really help local schools? You and I have an insatiable appetite for electricity. Come with me and we'll look at the issues relative to wind farms and the communities that they serve. This is the Windfarm Guy. Hi, this is Dennis Stout and thank you for joining me for this episode of the Windfarm Guy. The spread of wind energy in rural America has been a financial boon to school districts. However, because of the complexity of how schools are financed, the impact on student achievement can be limited, according to a recent study that was conducted by public finance, education economics, and energy policy researchers at the University of Connecticut, Berkeley National Laboratory, and Amherst College. Over the past 25 years, wind energy has blossomed in the United States, rising from less than 2 gigawatts of installed capacity in 1995 to over 110 gigawatts in 2020, enough to meet more than 7% of the entire nation's electricity demand. With all this rural development come property tax revenues. Wind projects paid an estimated $1.6 billion in property tax revenues to states and local jurisdictions in 2019. That is no doubt welcome revenue for school districts in rural areas which sometimes struggle to generate local tax revenue. But the researchers wanted to know, how are school districts using those wind farm revenues? And is this money helping boost student achievement? Both valid questions. They found that wind farms led to large increases in local revenues to school districts. Schools dramatically increased spending on capital outlays such as buildings and equipment, but made only modest increases to their operating budgets, like hiring more teachers to reduce class size. Previous studies have shown that smaller class sizes result in better student achievement. So, why are districts putting new tax revenues into capital spending rather than class size reduction? Their conclusion? It's due to state school finance formulas and state and county level tax laws and the incentives they provide to school administrators. The amount of tax revenue a school district gets from a wind farm depends on state and local laws and how those laws interact with state school finance formulas. States use a wide variety of approaches to tax wind farms, ranging from normal property tax treatment to temporary tax holidays. Sometimes wind farms make payments in lieu of taxes, known as pilots. Texas, the #1 wind energy state, has a complicated system of local taxation of wind farms. Texas uses a formula to take money from school districts with high property tax revenues per pupil and give it to poorer districts. But in Texas, that does not apply to local property tax revenue that's dedicated to paying off debt. So, school districts have a strong incentive to borrow money by selling bonds to pay for capital improvements. Then, use revenues from the wind farms to pay off those bonds. As a result, school districts in Texas tend to put wind tax revenues into buildings and facilities, rather than into teachers and operations. The growth in wind energy development over time and across the country provides an ideal setting to examine how wind energy can impact school district finances and, in turn, student performance. The researchers' sample included 638 school districts. They found that new wind farms result in large increases in the amount of local revenue that is brought in per student, with only small reductions in state aid. They also found large boosts in per pupil expenditures. Researchers found that most of those new expenditures were used for building improvements or new facilities rather than operating expenses. District spending on buildings went up by as much as 73%, while operating expenditures decreased only slightly, by about 2%. This allocation of funds seems to be driven in part by the formulas that states use to provide aid to local school districts. In order to equalize spending, states typically reduce the amount of funds they send to a district that sees an increase in local tax revenues. In some cases, though, that applies only when a district spends more on day-to-day operations, not when it boosts building improvements or new construction. So to avoid losing state aid, districts are more likely to use any new local revenues from wind farms for buildings or repairs than for operating expenses. While school facilities and equipment no doubt are improved, new wind farm revenues resulted in little to no change in class sizes or teacher salaries. This may sound wasteful, but it needs to be noted that the students still benefit tremendously. Even with wind farm tax funds being directed to buildings and such, that boost in school district revenue allows more of other resources to be directed to students and teachers. Some school programs and their associated facilities are very expensive. Science programs, fine arts programs, and athletics are all expensive programs. By having state-of-the-art facilities provided by wind farms, schools can better afford the staffing and materials needed to make those facilities function well and even reduce class sizes. If you appreciate what I've said today, be sure and click like and subscribe below. If you have thoughts or want me to address a particular topic relative to wind farms, please also leave me a comment. Another point that cannot be overstated is the families themselves. Rural America is hurting. For decades, families have moved from the country to cities for jobs and better education opportunities for their children. As a result, the tax base in the rural school districts have diminished greatly. Therefore, many districts have been on life support and their buildings have become dated and in disrepair. With new facilities, better equipment, cutting-edge material, and additional teachers, families with children are not only staying, but many are returning. To a large degree, the wind industry is saving rural America. This is Dennis Stout, and I'm the Wind Farm Guy. Thank you for watching. Working together, we can make good energy decisions and save our planet. I am the Wind Farm Guy.